Hello and welcome to ImperaProject, a project built on a dream. Our dear philosophy enthusiasts, in our last video we presented the situation in Romania and it seems that the video was well received. We are glad to see that what happens in our country makes the object of interest for so many of you. As we promised, today's video is going to contain a small discussion about the recent statements of Vice President JD Vance related to our country, an analysis of the recent declarations and irresponsible behavior of the Trump administration, and a couple of thoughts for what is going to happen next. Now let's think about what was the most used word so far.
They have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace.
President Putin wants to have peace now, and that's good. And he didn't want to have peace with Biden.
I'm for peace. You promised peace. The Romanian people want peace.
A solid candidate for Word of the Year, perhaps, but one has to wonder how exactly is this everlasting peace going to be achieved, and what we have seen so far makes us think that an end of war is exactly what is not going to happen. But further escalations are to be expected. Perhaps not right now, but somewhere in the near future. But before we start this video, don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe to ImperaProject for more videos in which we discuss philosophy, politics and many other interesting topics. With your help, we managed to surpass the 1000 subscribers milestone. And for that, we are grateful. Now, without any further ado, let's begin. After the Anschluss of March 1938, the Third Reich has decided its next target, the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia. Agitators were spread among the German population of Sudetenland in order to incite unrest and thus serving on a silver plate an excuse to the Reich to invade. Although Czechoslovakia had alliances with Britain and France and even the Soviet Union, no one felt prepared to engage the Third Reich in an open conflict. The Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain decided that Czechoslovakia had to give up its territory in order to prevent a full annexation, and we all know how that ended. The Munich Agreement saw the arbitration of four major powers, the Third Reich, Britain, France and Italy, without the Czechoslovakians being invited to the discussion or even consulted by the French and British before being asked to give up their territory. This remained known in history as the Appeasement policy, which proved to be disastrous and sparked the most devastating military conflict in our history. A terrible political and military blunder. We know that the appeasement policy was used by Britain to buy time to rearm itself, but once again it did not work that well. Does it sound familiar though? On the 18th of February, the emissaries of Russia and USA met in order to conduct early peace negotiations, without the involvement of Ukraine and the European Union. We can't forget that President Trump had a great call that lasted for a long time with Vladimir Putin, thus breaking the isolation effort that the Allies tried to impose on Russia. This narrative feels extremely similar with the Munich Agreement, especially that President Trump seems to portray Ukraine as being the aggressor and that they could have made a deal. This sounds a lot like appeasement and wishful thinking. It is similar to saying that Czechoslovakia should have ended World War II before it began by surrendering to German demands. It is similar to saying to 1914 France that they should stop resisting and just surrender to the Third Reich. We know France surrendered, everyone knows, but they tried to fight back to a certain degree. The fact that two superpowers, although there is room for doubting their superpower status, meet to decide the fate of a sovereign democracy that has been fighting for its survival for 3 years, it's a very dangerous move. Right now, the USA seems to convey the message through this move and through others, which we will discuss later in this video, that its traditional and historical allies have no value. It seems that the USA wants to pursue closer ties with Russia and to break ties with the European Union. This tactic of portraying the victim of an imperial ambition as the aggressor is childish, and the worst part is that it has zero credibility. There is no argument which one can give that will transform Ukraine, a small country, less prepared and less influential than Russia, into the aggressor. Saying that Ukraine is responsible for this war is like saying Georgia is responsible for the Russo-Georgian War of 2008. It's childish and unbefitting of the leader of the longest democracy, as Americans like to call themselves. We get it. America has been a democracy for more than 2000 years, but by adding to the equation corporate leaders that act as oligarchs, lobbying and a two-party system, one has to wonder just how democratic America truly is. But once again, we will come back to this part later in the video. So to summarize, these events resemble a lot the Munich Agreement, and if they somehow go through, these peace talks won't manage anything other than to further fuel the Russian war machine and arrogance at the expense of Ukraine, thus putting all of us in danger. If it's not the danger of a third world war, it is clearly the danger of an European one. We hear so many people talking about our country, how Romania should be neutral, how staying out of Russia's way will ensure we are safe. Only a fool would believe that Russia will let you be just because you are neutral. And in this particular context, neutrality favors the aggressor. Romania is not Switzerland. There is no point in invading Switzerland, and everyone knows that. And nobody will risk it, but Romania and Poland can't afford to be neutral. Our country should, by now, know very well the price of neutrality and where that path leads. After the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was signed in 1939, the Soviet Union claimed Bessarabia and northern Bukovina, which were given up without fight, as Romania tried to avoid confrontation. We are not advocates of war. It is embarrassing enough that in the 21st century, after 2 world wars and almost reaching a nuclear catastrophe during the Cold One, Europe has yet another conflict on its territories. But such is the feeble mind of the human race. There is always an enemy to fight. How embarrassing. Since the end of World War II, the President of the United States has been called the leader of the free world. A title that was worn better or worse by all the presidents of the United States, starting with Franklin Delano Roosevelt and ending with Donald Trump. This idea of a president that does not deal with dictators and takes a firm stance against oppressive regimes seems to have died with the current administration. Every single thing that the Trump administration has done since taking office is pure madness, and it reeks of improvisation and not of a coherent plan of action. President Trump seems to be bluffing about everything and waits until someone falls for these childish tricks. Let's all be honest here, President Trump doesn't have and never had a coherent plan for the war. It's all a charade. And this tactic of constant improvisation is creeping through the walls of his administration. Recently, Vice President JD Vance made a couple of statements which seem to be completely out of place. And, just like in the case of Ukraine, seems to portray the victim as responsible for what happened. A really insulting tactic.
Gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
No democracy is very strong. The resistance of democratic rule is always tested, and the harder the test, the harder the democratic structures shake. Those democratic values need constant reinforcement, and in the face of economic instability and declining standard of living, adding the fact that a democratic sovereign country was invaded next door, can one truly judge that the foundation started to shake? Obviously no, but that doesn't mean the fault belongs solely to Romania. We stated in the previous video a lot of reasons why democratic rule is constantly frowned upon by the average Romanian. Corruption, inefficiency, nostalgia for communist times, and misunderstanding of Romania's activity under fascist rule in World War II. But once again we have to state, that isn't a reason to set the whole country on fire. To put the blame on a country that has been a democracy for only 36 years, we would go as far as saying that democracy came to Romania after 1992, so 33 years is morally wrong. One can blame Romania for many things: incompetent and corrupt politicians, an educational system that fails to educate people about the horrors of the fascist rule, but it can't be blamed for failing to counter influence coming from external factors. These are not sides of a weak democracy. They are sides of incompetent institutions, sure, of corruption and many other factors, but corruption is a trend that can be seen in many types of government. So what we make out of this statement is that Vice President JD Vance completely ignores the threat represented by Russian influence and meddling of far-right sympathizers, and instead chooses once again to blame the victim. Real politics here, no joke. Taking into account his position as a vice president, one can assume that this is the official position taken by the White House.
Leaders represent an important constituency. It is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election.
Well, there is a problem with expressing some opinions, and this is not censorship, it is the law. Let's take, for example, the Government Emergency Ordinance from 2010. For the prevention and combating of incitement to national, racial or religious hatred, discrimination and the commission of crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, this emergency ordinance regulates the prohibition of organizations, symbols and acts of a fascist, legionary, racist or xenophobic nature, as well as the promotion of the cult of persons guilty of committing crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. We know that the right nowadays always likes to pretend their free speech is censored by the big bad left. This ordinance is from 2002. We won't go as far as to say that your liberty of speech ends the moment you are hurting someone, as that is highly subjective. We will say your liberty of speech ends the moment you are breaking the law. And other democratic countries have the same law: Germany, Austria, France, Italy, Spain, and well, even Russia. The United States doesn't have it because they never felt the effects of such an ideology. To summarize, you are not allowed to partake in democratic play if you are promoting fascism. And today, the 26th of February 2025, the far-right candidate CălinGeorgescu was detained for breaking exactly this law. Elon Musk posted on X that CălinGeorgescu was arrested. No, he's just interrogated for breaking that law. Nobody arrested anyone yet. That's just fake news. He was detained for a certain period of time as part of the investigation. The reasons? 6 reasons that can be easily proven. Instigation against democratic order, spreading false information, lying about the sources of income during the campaign, creating a fascist organization, promoting war criminals and fascist ideas, creating or supporting an anti-Semitic organization. Everything we said in the past video related to CălinGeorgescu turned out to be true. What a surprise. Once your opinion starts promoting fascism, your opinion is invalid, and that's only right. People tend to not understand that there is a limit even in freedom, and that's normal. If your freedom hurts the freedom of someone else, it ends there. These are the principles of a democratic society, which America seems to be less of nowadays. Unlimited freedom is not yours to do whatever you want. It is often the unlimited freedom of others to do whatever they want with you. That's the social contract. You give up some of your liberties and freedom to the state so that the state protects you and recognizes you and your property as being yours. You think a law is unfair? Then gather together with others and try to stop it, democratically. Romania has a long history of fighting unfair laws and government ordinances, and we think that's a sign of a strong democracy. And since we are on a topic of free speech and listening to everyone's opinions, one has to wonder why the White House barred Associated Press from spaces like the Oval Office. So this is what American free speech looks like nowadays? Censoring only the ones we dislike, Mr. Trump? We don't really know what shared values we have or we don't have, but recently Romania wasn't the stage for a failed coup d'etat, as was the January 6th US Capitol attack, which was conducted by Trump supporters and ended up with fatalities and wounded people. Also, President Trump has denied the legitimacy of the 2020 presidential election, calling the illegitimacy of the results. Sounds familiar. No matter what happens from now on, we strongly believe that the European Union should struggle to keep closer ties among its members. Maybe slowly but surely move towards federalization, perhaps the United States of Europe, as it seems to be the only way to combat this far-right tendency. Time moves only in one direction, and that's toward the future, so turning back is not an option. We don't need a Second Munich, or a new Weimar, or a Third World War. Those times should stay in the past while we look toward the future. Obviously, everyone wants to live in times of peace, but that peace won't be secured with appeasements. The Russian Federation has feedback on the effectiveness of its military forces. Yes, it was a shameful display and the whole world laughed many times, but now they know they can't fight against NATO. Giving them time to prepare is only going to lead to a new war. Do you want peace? Then it's time to see this war of attrition meeting its natural end, with one of the sides surrendering. And the negotiation can only happen between Ukraine and Russia. Thank you very much for watching this video. The next one is probably going to be an analysis of the current political context in relation to the past. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe to ImperaProject, and until next time, have the best day of your life.